Hello and welcome to my channel. I am Daisy, your hostess. In this video, we are continuing on with the book titled Dominion and Power, or The Science of Life and Living by Charles Brodie Patterson. If you're new to my channel, welcome. And if you're just finding us here at this video and would like to access the previous chapter, please do visit my book playlist. And to our subscribing community, welcome back. So glad to have you, and I look forward to seeing how we're going to progress in our conversation with this book. Before I jump into the next chapter, I'd like to highlight some of my key points that I thought was worth contemplating. When this author talked about the idea of the law of cause and effect, he also mentioned the law of involution. Now, I would like to preface this by saying that I have no formal education training in any of these topics. I'm just sharing this as a friend would while we're having coffee or tea and just having a conversation and bringing our collective minds together, because I am of the belief that in that space, we all know a little bit of everything. And it is in the realization that we know nothing, yet we know everything in a collective sense, is that I am inviting you to join me on this exploration and to allow ourselves to explore these areas and to set aside our biases and our preconceived knowledge and preconceived information about what we do know, and giving this an opportunity to see where it's going to take us. So I would like to sometime in the near future have a video on the different types of laws or universal laws as I keep jotting them down in my journal here. So now we have this one called the law of involution, mentioned in this previous chapter by the author, without going into a rabbit hole, but definitely something to earmark for a future discussion, that the law of involution in itself opens up to the law of evolution, yet it is in that law of cause and effect, meaning going back, as I understand it, to those initial causes, going deep inside, then that is how we can, move forward. So it's almost like the law of duality. You can't have one with the other. So in and of itself, the law of involution will be more, as I understand it, related to those causes, while the law of evolution deals with the effects, what we see on the outer. And another point that allows us to give pause and to ponder and think upon was in that aspect of discussing the three planes of development, which of course he mentions the physical, the intellectual, and the spiritual. He goes on to say that these, adding faith, love, and hope, demand greater use in the aspect of transmuting plain things into their finer grade, and that the spiritual plane sees everything as one, while we're here on the physical plane, we see things as divided and we see things as separate. And I do agree with this author that we need to see the fullness and the wholeness of man. As I see it and understand it, for us to move forward as the human race, we need to regard man, metaphorically speaking, as a soul and mind unit, where we are beginning to understand the magnitude of the mind, that what the mind of man thinks, the body becomes. And with that, I'm going to leave that there. Hopefully you'll leave me a comment if you've actually been to that chapter, and we can initiate a conversation here in the commentary of this video. So without further delay, sit back as we turn the page to Chapter 2. Chapter 2, Good and Evil. A quote by Browning. It was not strange I saw no good in man, to overbalance all the wear and waste of faculties displayed in vain, but born to prosper in some better sphere. And why? In my own heart had not been made wise to trace love's faint beginning in mankind. To know even hate is but a mask of loves, to see a good in evil and a hope in ill success. End quote. A quote by Pope. Nothing is foreign, Parts relate to whole. One all-extending, all-preserving soul connects each being, greatest with the least, made beast in aid of man, and man of beast. All served, all serving, nothing stands alone. The chain holds on, and where it ends unknown. Has God, thou fool, worked solely for thy good, thy joy, thy pastime, thy attire, thy food? End quote. A quote by Charles B. Newcomb. Light is positive and radiates. Darkness is negative and absorbs. One is powerful, the other powerless. We underestimate the power of good. So with good and evil, we exaggerate the power of evil. Evil is the weakest thing in life. It is a mirage, a temporary appearance only, and contrary to all the tides and currents of the universe. Good has all the forces of the infinite behind it. Its power is incalculable. It never fails. End quote. At the very outset of life, man is confronted by the greatest of all mysteries, the problem of good and evil. Within this problem is contained the solution of all the lesser questions of life that vex and perplex the mind. It is not only this problem that is the first thing to demand man's attention, but when he has solved in the world and the things of the world have lost their hold on him forever, for he has risen triumphant over sin and death, so that we might say that his solution is the Alpha and Omega of all the wisdom of the world. In the first stages of man's life begins the personifications of good and evil, and he has many gods. Whatever affects his life in a beneficial way becomes a god of good. Whatever has harmful effects becomes a god of evil. In his worship of the gods of the good, the qualities corresponding to those he worships come into a living existence in his own nature. In the same way, the attributes which he endows his gods of evil find expression in his own life. He is thus constantly between two forces, one making for good and the other for evil, the one calling out for love and reverence, the other hate and fear. As he allows his mind to come under the sway of the one or the other, so his whole life is influenced and he becomes what his gods are. As his knowledge increases, the number of his gods decreases until at last he has but two, a god of good and a god of evil. But his state is no better than before. The many personalities of the past have resolved themselves into the attributes of these two gods. At the very heart of man's life is the divine ideal, which is eternally steadfast, which knows naught of anything save good. To some degree, he is conscious of this, and instinctively he places the evil of life outside himself, so when he is guilty of any evil thing, he attributes it to the influence exerted over him by the god of evil. He shifts the weight of responsibility from his own shoulders, and the devil is made the scapegoat for his sins. When, however, he conforms to his higher ideals of good, he attributes this good to himself rather than to any external being. The reason for these two conditions might be summed up as follows. There being no evil at the heart of life, it follows that evil must be external to the life. Therefore, the responsibility of evil doing must be placed elsewhere. But the sense of good being an innate quality of the life does not require any external being to account for it. Evil does not reach further back than the imaging faculty of the mind of man, and it comes from man's failure to comprehend the true relation of things in life. It comes from man's inability to grasp the unity of life. It comes from partial vision and undeveloped knowledge, wherein things are seen not as they are, but rather as they seem to be. There is a law of contradictions which governs the true knowledge that distinguishes between the real and the unreal. A law which eventually makes clear that all is of God, that is or is to be, and God is good. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil shows us that the reality of good and evil shows us that the reality of good is only made evident to us through that which contradicts it, evil. That evil is not something in and of itself, but rather the dark background which brings out life's perfect picture, that it has only power as we believe in it and give it power, that it is the absence of light and of knowledge. Just as darkness is the absence of the light of the sun, so evil is the absence of the knowledge of the law of God and exists as darkness exists, not as a reality, but as an unreal something which shall pass away before the coming of the light of truth. No matter at what point on the surface of life we start, no matter how evil a thing may seem to be, in the final analysis of the underlying thought or motive we find nothing but good. Good may be diverted into wrong channels and so fail in positive expression. When the ideal is not perfectly expressed, as the law demands it shall be, the perverted good becomes apparent evil. Because of perfect law and order throughout the universe, any failure on the part of man to bring his life in accord with this law and order violates his intuitive recognition of the harmony necessary to his well-being and results in a discordant condition which is termed evil. Let us hold clearly in mind this thought. Everything is good. Let us consider the universe as a perfect whole composed of many parts, each part having its perfect office. When, however, a part is made to do duty for other than that for which it was intended, the law is violated and an element of friction and discord is engendered, which constitute what is termed evil. Sometime it will be recognized that whatsoever man does which results in harmony and peace of mind is in reality the fulfilling of the law. It makes no difference one way or the other what the conventionally minded think. Harmony is, after all, the keynote of existence. In the life of man, there is a constant process of development, each stage being perfect within its limitations, just as the unripened fruit is perfect in so far as it has developed. To the more highly developed mind, when there is knowledge of law and order, looking back on the stages below and failing to find knowledge equal to its own, it conceives such conditions as being wicked or evil. Shakespeare uttered a great truth when he said there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And Paul, a still greater one, when he said he was persuaded that all things are good, but to him who thinketh a thing to be evil, to him it is evil. At every stage in the development of man, wherein there is lack of knowledge and conformity to law, such development is brought about through many and varied experiences, and these cause sorrow of mind and pain of body. If man cannot see and choose the higher way, there remains no other way for his purification save through the fire which burns out the dross of life. While passing through the experiences needful to the working out of his salvation, and failing to see the good, he looks upon his trials and sufferings as being evil. There are no mistakes in God's plan. God did not make some people good and others evil. Neither did he foreordain some to everlasting life and others to everlasting death. His perfect thought is wrapped up in every soul, and there is nothing that can nullify it. Man is not good or bad. Knowledge and right use of mental faculties tend to make him harmonious. Lack of knowledge and consequent disobedience of law result in discord, so that the chords of life are not harmoniously played. But as with the musician, experience and practice make perfect. Whether a man is consciously and actively engaged in discovering and conforming to law and order, or whether his eyes are blinded to the light, The force of life pressing outward from the center brings with it unfoldment of innate qualities. Where consciousness of the truth of this exists, the real joy of life comes through the knowing and the doing. In our study of good and evil, we must approach it from still another standpoint. That is, that every inner ideal is seeking outward expression. And in this effort, there is the resistance which one form of life offers to another. In the great economy of life, up to a certain stage in the development of man, resistance seems to be a necessary qualification to growth. When the resistance becomes too great, growth is thwarted. When there is a little resistance, there is comparatively little mental or physical development. An illustration of this may be found among the people who live in the frigid zone where the outer resistance is so great it becomes a struggle to maintain physical existence, and the sensibilities of the people are blunted, while in the torrid zone, where physical existence is so easily maintained, there is a consequent sluggishness of mind and body. Only in the temperate zones do we find the more perfect development, which comes from resistance being neither too great nor too little, showing us that between extremes man finds his point of balance. The balance on one plane differs from the balance on another. The resistance and competition on a lower plane, when transferred to a higher plane, would no longer prove beneficial, so the law of resistance, as understood by the physically and intellectually developed, would make way for the law of non-existence when man unfolds to a knowledge of his true relationship to God and man. One might ask, does the law of God change? No, the law is eternal and unchanging. But man's perception of it changes. At one stage of life, we are only able to perceive the most external manifestation of law, so that it seems to be physical in its inception and action. At another stage, thought and reason reach a still higher conclusion. Law here has its beginning in mind and its manifestation in the material. But in both cases, there is failure to recognize the perfect law. For sin, sickness, and death continue to be real conditions rather than conditions which have an existence that passes away with the coming of the fuller knowledge of the law of the spirit of life, which frees from sin and death. In reality, there is neither sin, sickness, nor death. God's law can neither be broken nor set aside, and when man knows this of a very truth, then will come the real freedom of life. The belief in the personal self is one of the causes of much of the seeming evil of the world. The thought of personality separates man from God and from his fellow man, and personal existence and well-being become the leading motives of life. This condition generates selfishness and the many evils which flow from it. If we could know that there is no separation from God or man in all the great universe, that God is in all, that life is in all, that man is one with the source of his being, that men are as closely related to one another as they are to God, that we are nothing apart from God, that one's neighbor is himself, the thought of personality would fade from our minds forever. Selfishness is the great devil one has to contend with in life. It not only retards one's own progress, but also stands in the way of the development of others, in that whatever one habitually feels or thinks is constantly acting upon the lives and minds of others, helping to generate similar conditions. The selfish thought and feeling can go out from one who indulges in it, adding to the density of other minds who to some degree are living selfish lives. Our thoughts can become imps of darkness or angels of light, just as we choose to make them. False thoughts and false emotions engendered by selfishness are the seeds of sin and sorrow, disease and death. The one, however, who lives the unselfish life is through such living protecting himself from all adverse influence. For selfishness can no more enter the mental atmosphere of an unselfish person than darkness can come while the sun is shining. Selfishness is the father of lies, whose place is in the outer darkness. Nothing is ever gained by a selfish person, save the experience which leads him in the end to see how unprofitable selfishness is and the necessity of leaving it behind him. As one presses forward in his quest of light and truth, the life becomes a constant overcoming, wherein all the shadows and unrealities are left behind. One wherein all that is partial or incomplete becomes whole and complete, and the knowledge of the real self comes. Then all is changed, and our thoughts, inspired by our deepest feelings, become messengers of light and life and love to bless and do good to all. All the evil is gone. God and his creation is all there is, and man is at one with God and his fellow man. To the pure in heart, all things become pure. When man looks with God's eyes on the world about him, he will pronounce all things good. He will know that from first to last all things have been working together for his perfect development, and that God's law, when fully understood, is the law of love. Having thus risen to a knowledge of the true law, the real inheritance of life is made known. That we are sons of God and joint heirs with Christ, that we have passed from death unto life into the glorious liberty of the sons of God. End of chapter 2. Stay here with me as we flip the page now to the next chapter. Please do take a second here and hit that like button. Chapter 3. Elements in Character Building. A quote by Muzumdar. Will faith ever remain unscientific? Will science ever remain uninspired? Faith cures disease, causes energy, clears the understanding, conquers men, gives the losing cause its final triumph. Faith as a law of scientific investigation has not been cultivated, and science as a method of divine inspiration has not been pursued. Will no one teach us the law of the wisdom of true spirituality? End quote. A quote by Pope. Slave to no sect, who takes no private road, but looks through nature up to nature's God, pursues that chain which links the immense design, joins heaven and earth, and immortal and divine, sees that no being any bliss can know, but touches some above and some below, learns from this union of the rising whole, the first, last purpose of the human soul, and knows where faith, law, morals all began, all end in love of God and love of men. End quote. Faith. What we are is the result of what we have thought. In the process of evolution, thinking may have covered a vast period of time. Nevertheless, thought shapes the protoplasm as well as every other form in the ascent of life until, in the fullness of time, the body of man becomes the outward expression of that intelligence. Thought are in all things, even from the least to the greatest. Thought in itself is only the instrument which shapes all form. The real substance of life is faith. Take away the element of faith, and thought ceases to be creative. To the degree that faith enters into the life, man becomes a creator. In thoroughly intelligent character building, we must consider the relative value of everything entering into the plan of life in order to get perfect results. Faith may be said to be the foundation principle in the life of man. Through it, we become consciously related to God. From faith were the mountains made, and by faith shall the mountains be removed. There are no obstacles in life which are not leveled by the power of faith. Faith is the real substance of life, and love is the only law to which faith must conform. We lay an eternal foundation when we accept love as the law and faith as the substance of all things. There is no law, there is no substance apart from love and faith. The recognition of this makes man one with God, giving him dominion and power over all things. Many have thought faith a state created by the mind, something we could add to or take from, but the mind is not its author. The mind may throw wide the door and invite faith to enter and flood the outer life. When this takes place, man can accomplish in the outer world whatever he wills to do. A New Testament writer tells us of the wonderful works done by the great and holy men of Israel through faith. When we realize its importance and absolute necessity to our well-being, we should desire it fervently and seek it diligently. The influx of faith is dependent very greatly on its use. Only as we use it in accordance with its law does the supply equal the demand. The real development of character comes through the mind's use of faith, and through its influence the mind becomes positive and is no longer lost in the sea of doubt. Thought is like the Galatia of Pygmalion, while faith is the principle which animates and gives life. Bring the animating principle into everything you think and everything you do, and your every work will become instinct with life. The great pictures, the great music, the great statuary, the great poetry, and everything that has been great in this world has been great only because of the faith put into the work. Everything which endures because of faith. Let us desire, let us pray, that in all things we may have faith. Doubt saps the very force of life, and in a spirit of doubt we can accomplish no good thing. In the spirit of faith, we put our hope and trust in God. The mind's thought pictures become clear. There is perfect fearlessness, and every faculty of mind functions in the way it was intended from the beginning. We make our lives complex and hard to live by departing from the great essential things of life and living in the non-essentials. But we can be what we will to be through love and faith. Character building is not making something out of nothing, but it is the right use of the talents with which we are endowed. We do not build character through or by the external knowledge of life. The real fountain of wisdom has its source in the secret places of the Most High. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. But wisdom, the word of God in the life, shall endure forever. Let us learn to be thoroughly consistent. Let us see that the law in its action discloses to us an evolution from within rather than an accumulation of knowledge from without. Faith is the great vitalizing force of the universe. It heals the sick, gives sight to the blind. It is more real than anything we can see or touch. Faith is not belief. Without faith, works are dead. Yet the real manifestation of faith becomes evident through works. In character building, we require faith in God, in man, and in ourselves, as well as in whatever we undertake. If we are lacking in faith, life becomes a failure. Abiding in faith, all things tend towards success. Sometime the importance and value of faith in the life will become so thoroughly understood that doubt will have no place. Hope. Auspicious hope, in thy sweet garden grow wreaths for each toil, a charm for every woe. Won by their sweets in nature's languid hour, the way-worn pilgrim seeks the summer bower. There, as the wild bee murmurs on the wing, what peaceful dreams thy handmaid spirits bring! What viewless forms the Aeolian organ play, and sweep the furrowed line of anxious thought away. Faith and hope are so closely related, it is difficult to speak of one as apart from the other. Hope has an important office in life, for it is the foundation on which faith builds. There can be no living faith without hope. It is because we know, in part, that we have hope for still greater things. Before the spirit of hope, gloom and doubt must pass away. Hope tends to clear and improve the mental vision, and rest comes to the mind because of its presence. All the pessimism of the world has never had the tendency to make man better, and we know that happiness is as far from pessimism as the North Pole is from the South. With the inner realization of hope will come an outer expression, which in itself will be a gospel of joy and glad tidings of peace and goodwill, giving hope and courage to others. Life is one eternal round of progress. In its spiral motion, one height reached discloses still another, making hope an eternal factor in man's development. Hope is a never-failing spring. From it we drink the waters which quench the thirst occasioned by the unrest of doubt and despair. Let us learn to place our hope and trust in the eternal Father who brought us into existence, that Father who has cared for us and has given to us of every attribute which he possesses, given them to us that we may use them to become his representative on this earth. Let us learn to be hopeful in all things, knowing that whatever comes to us brings a lesson that will work for our good and profit. Under seemingly the most adverse circumstances, hope is to be found if we seek it, and it will aid us to overcome all difficulties. Live in the spirit of love. Let hope do its perfect work, and let the faith which is in thee be the substance from which the whole life is fashioned. Love. There's no good of life but love, but love. What else looks good is but some shade flung from love, gilds it, gives its worth. It is not possible to understand in our minds the nature of God love. In our souls we may feel and know, but language is dumb when we try to express through spoken words the fullness of love. For oft are we deceived by its counterfeit, emotion, which is awakened by some external influence brought to bear on the mind. We may rest assured of the fact that no element of selfishness enters into divine love, that jealousy is no part of it. Love, like the air we breathe, is universal. It is in us, and we are in it, and yet we may be blind to its influence. It is God, ever present with us, even though we are unaware of the presence. Love is the fulfilling of the law. Where one consciously abides in love, there can be no thought or act contrary to law. It is the law of the Spirit of life which makes us free from the law of sin and death. He who lives in this law abides in the shadow of the Almighty. No evil thing shall befall him, for love taketh no account of evil, there being no sense of separateness in love. Evil comes into the life of man because of his thought of separateness from God. Love is the eternal sunshine of life, and to one living in that sunshine, there can be no darkness. Under its influence, the external universe radiates a heavenly beauty, and perfection is everywhere apparent. Where love is, there is kindness. Where love is, every thought becomes a perfect deed. Love is the pearl of great price, and its possession includes all else. Love in the life of man radiates in all directions, influencing every person who comes in contact with it and changing every condition in life. Only as we love do we become really conscious of living, and without love we are dead, dead to a knowledge of God and man, dead to a knowledge of our real selves. The resurrection to the life eternal comes with the conscious recognition of the divine love working in us to will and to do. When we desire love with our whole thought and keep the mind restful, then will love come to us and bless us, bringing perfect happiness and that peace of God which passeth all understanding. Desire in heart and mind is the motive power or magnet which attracts to us not only things from the objective world, but opens the way for an overflow of the inner feeling. It relates us to both the inner and outer world and is of the utmost importance in aiding the development of life. If we desire to control our lives in a lawful, orderly way, then we may say that the first step has been taken in the attainment of control. All desire for real development in life must be directed toward the awakening of faith, hope, and love, the attributes of the soul, which have their source in God. And the true self-control finds its inception in these highest attributes. He who seeks to bring these soul qualities into an active existence in his life will find it the most direct way to acquire perfect control of thought and action. Because in working from the center outward, the way of life is a straight and narrow one. Meditation, desire to know God's will, brings the outer life into closer touch with the inner forces. As the mind becomes restful and it's at peace, it mirrors and reflects the universal will. This inner realization of oneness is in turn reflected to the mind from the outer world, producing both unity and harmony of thought. When the mind realizes both the inner and outer unity of life and expression, all sense of fear is lost. The whole attitude of man becomes changed. The thought of oneness enters into everything. Duty to God and to man becomes plain. Every thought picture is a true one. Every act finds perfect expression. Power is not only rightly directed, but its course is unimpeded and free. Every faculty of mind responds to the soul impulse, and the body is strengthened, quickened, and renewed. In centering the mind on the positive good, all negative or evil thought disappears. The kingdom of God is attained. The real purpose of life is disclosed in that man now glorifies God by showing forth his perfect image and likeness. Temptation. As an element in character building, many people might easily consider that temptation had no place and might desire to avoid anything of that nature. And yet, it is without doubt one of the greatest elements in character building. Therefore, if I seem to enter into the matter at some length, it is because I feel the necessity of showing the influence it has upon our everyday life. William Penn has said, God is better served in resisting a temptation to evil than in many formal prayers. In the Lord's Prayer, we read, "Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil." Whether or no the Master ever used the words, "lead us not into temptation," the fact stands preeminent that temptation is a means of growth, is necessary in the life of man. We are told that Jesus was tempted and tried like as we are, and it would seem that such temptation had for its purpose the perfecting of his own life, as well as the presenting of an ideal which would prove helpful to all who would follow in his footsteps. The sin does not consist in one's being tempted, but in entertaining the temptation and allowing it to fasten itself in one's mind until at last it finds expression in word or act. The above passage from the Lord's Prayer would convey to the mind that thought of God as tempting or leading us into temptation, while in the temptation of Jesus in the wilderness, the devil or adversary was the one that tempted. We are also told in the scriptures not to say we are tempted of God, for God tempts no man. No matter how the passage may read, we are led to believe that the thought would be better expressed: leave us not in temptation. That is, in our hour of trial, God's Spirit be with us, causing us to rise above trial and temptation, delivering us from the evil of wrongdoing. Throughout life, we are encompassed by temptation, so that there is no time when we are not obliged to choose between a lesser and a greater good. As we meet and overcome each temptation in life, we are strengthened. Each temptation put underfoot brings with it the ability to meet and overcome still greater things. Temptation is rooted in selfishness, and there is no temptation apart from it. By overcoming the personal self and rising into the universal selfhood, we are freed from its influence. It is not the Spirit of God that tempts us, but it is the carnal mind, the mind of the world. The Spirit of God is with us to lead us out of all temptation. On all planes of consciousness, temptation is active, but it is more subtle on the higher planes. On the physical plane, the appeal comes to man through his sense nature, the things that are pleasing to the eye and the things that are good for food. All these are good in their relative places, but when a universal good is subordinated to a selfish end, the willful perversion becomes a source of evil. It must not be understood that the sense nature of man is evil in itself. The senses are not the arbiters of one's actions, but convey to the mind reports of objective phenomena. The mind, acting on these impressions received, determines the course to be followed, be it beneficial or otherwise. Temptations on the lower plane can be clearly defined, having to do solely with things of a purely physical nature, and with temperance and moderation, refraining from excess in all things, and with thoughtful consideration for the welfare of others, man overcomes temptation, therefore by strengthening his own character. An entirely different phase of temptation is that which comes to a man in the desire to be praised by men, and here the perversion of his highest development often occurs in order to gratify the vanity of the mind. Pride, envy, and jealousy are among the enemies to be met and conquered. We cannot so easily define the temptations on this plane as on the plane below, for their name is legion. It is possible, however, to determine whether an action is right or wrong by its effect on ourselves and others. Anything that confers a real personal good cannot bring in its train an evil effect on some other life. Every good thought and every good deed have their centers in individual life, but in their actual working out, they must bless the lives of many. But what works an injury to the many can bring no good to the individual. Every time one forgoes a selfish desire and generously gives unto others of his fullness, life becomes easier, and the temptation of that desire ceases to vex and trouble the life. More subtle and far-reaching are the temptations which come to man through the desire for riches and power. In the pursuit of riches, man loses sight of the more vital meanings of life, and the Master was quite right in saying that it was harder for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven than for a camel to enter the eye of the needle. When one is tempted by the desire for wealth, the love of it entering the mind displaces the higher love which would work for the welfare of humanity. Great wealth is seldom, if ever, a blessing. The responsibilities it brings are rarely fulfilled, and the law holds here, as well as in all things. To whom much is given, of him much shall be required. Very often, wealth serves to develop the love of power over men, making its possessor a tyrant, depriving others not only of their worldly goods, but their mental freedom as well. Many seek to find justification for the possession of great wealth, recount the good done by rich men, how much money they give on the support of charitable institutions, libraries, and schools for the education of the masses, as though this were enough in itself to offset all the misery and suffering caused to the many by the vast accumulation for the benefit of the one. There is a temptation, even in giving, for the ostentation which brings the giver prominently before the public gratifies his pride, in that men speak well of him. In summing up the whole matter, we would say that under one of three heads comes every temptation which presents itself in life: the appeal to the sense nature, desire for the praise of men, love of riches, and the worldly power that riches give. We know the Master met all these temptations. "Command that these stones be made bread," was answered. "Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. Cast thyself down from the pinnacle of the temple." And the answer was, "Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God." When riches and power were within the Master's grasp, he said, "Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve." When we read that Jesus was tempted and tried like as we are, yet without sin, this story of the temptation in the wilderness shows that every possible temptation was offered and was overcome by the affirmation of man's true relation to God. There is a bread of life more essential to man than the bread which sustains his physical body. Man should never prostitute his God-given powers to win the praise of men. Riches and power should never tempt one from his allegiance and service to God. Mistakes. Habits are formed at a time when they serve a purpose in life, but later on, when that purpose is outgrown, the habit, instead of proving helpful, often acts as a hindrance to greater development, and a kind of warfare is set up between old habits and new desires. Many people are governed more through subconscious habits acquired in the past than by conscious thought action. It is almost as though they were afraid to make any new departure, and they hold on to the old with a tenacity that might be worthy of a better object. They are so fearful that in any new departure they may take a mistaken course that, for the time being, they tend to retard their progress. Sometimes it is because they are fearful of interfering with their soul life that this course is followed. But be it understood that the mistakes in life are not made by the soul of man, but by the mind. Neither do mistakes affect the soul. They do, however, affect the whole mental and physical life of man. Viewed from the larger standpoint, there are no mistakes. Every experience that comes to us brings us a lesson whereby we may profit. The prodigal son was working out his salvation when he took the course he did, just as surely as did the elder brother who never left the father's home, and we have every reason to believe that the prodigal came to realization of the father's loving kindness before his brother. All things work together for good, whether we call them by the name of good or evil. Doubtless, the suffering caused by the course pursued by the prodigal son was far greater than that endured by the elder brother. It needs to be that offenses must come, no matter if they do bring suffering in their train. It is the sorrow and suffering in life that purify and perfect the character. It follows that if man has the power to make a mistake, he has also the power to correct it. That there is no mistake that can be made in life but what can be corrected. And what is our failure here but a triumph's evidence for the fullness of the days? Have we withered or agonized? Why else was the pause prolonged but the singing might issue thence? Why rushed the discords in, but that harmony should be prized? Sorrow is hard to hear, and doubt is slow to clear. Each sufferer says his say, his scheme of the weal and woe. He who teaches otherwise teaches not in accord with the divine law. It is never right to do evil that good may come, but out of every so-called evil must come good. The friction and discord in life are on the surface, but back of the surface are the eternal verities. The surface action is only an indication of growth and change taking place continually. Every mistake made may become a round in the ladder of progress, whereby we put the mistake underfoot, and through it and by it rise to a higher condition. There is no thought of failure in the divine plan, and everything is working together for the accomplishment of one great end. That end, the coming of God's kingdom in the outer and visible world, where perfect peace and harmony will replace the discord and unrest. The mind of man is the great battleground of life. The real enemies, if that they can be called, are found here. The one thing to subject and bring into perfect control in one's own mind. In doing this, we attain the real mastery of life. The thoughts we think give form to our words and deeds, and we become workers with God when we try to express perfect harmony in our own lives. Every thought picture of life should have God in it, not as a personality, but as a living principle in the life, making each thought strong and vital. When there are purity, beauty, and harmony in one's thoughts, then God is in them, and God will find expression in our lives. That is, we will become God-like. We will be gaining the real control. Everything we do partakes of the quality of our thought. If the thought is a perfect one, then the works also becomes perfect. But a perfect work can never come from imperfect thoughts. The greater wonder of a perfect thought is this, that it is a reflection of God's love and wisdom, and when uttered, it becomes God's spoken word. It was because they held their minds still until a perfect thought could enter that the prophets of old, when the word of the Lord came to them, spoke as those having authority. That thought they knew to be God's thought, and it could be given to the world as such. This is what we call inspiration. And when one speaks, inspired of the Spirit, he speaks not of himself, for the Father working within him is responsible for the word. Open your mouths, and I will fill them. When we feel the assurance of truth in our thoughts, we should try to make them effective by keeping the mind centered on them. That is, every thought that conveys to our mind an element of strength or beauty should be cherished as a part of our real inheritance. It would be found that in doing this, each true thought would banish a false thought, and by there would be no room in the mind for other than true thoughts. We would have formed a habit that would make it far easier for us to think such thoughts than otherwise. We would overcome all the mistakes that we had been making, and it would no longer be possible to make new ones. In this way, life would become a source of pleasure and happiness. For there is a wonderful joy in the present life when development is taking place, and we are conscious of it. It is a mistake to defer this joy to a future time when we may have it now. There are many elements in character building other than those treated in this chapter, but if one only goes to the source of life within and tries to live the whole life which takes in soul and mind and body in the order enumerated, then through such living, from center to circumference, must come the development in life, which we call character. End of chapter 3. If you haven't done so, may I ask, please do hit that like button. And if you know of someone that could benefit from this content, please share it with them. Also, if you'd like it to be easier for you to find this channel, please consider subscribing. Okay. I know it's getting good. I'm sure looking forward to the next chapter, which is chapter 4 of Dominion and Power, or The Science of Life and Living by Charles Brodie Patterson. And it's going to be about breath control. So I'll meet you at the next video.